Hello, everyone. You're welcome to the JMA Connections on this ninth day of the month of July 2026. I'm delighted to be with you all on this platform this day. And my apologies that we are beginning this broadcast later than I promised. I actually promised that we're going to begin at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time and 9 p.m. West and Central African Time. But unfortunately, we are starting well over an hour late, so my apologies for the late start. And of course, it was due to a lot of movements and logistical issues. That said, I want to extend very hearty regards to the entire intelligentsia of the southern Cameroons and also to the educated class of La République du Cameroon. Of course, I know that a lot of them do watch the JMA connections. I want to take this opportunity to extend as well very hearty regards to all the people of the southern Cameroons who continue to believe in our quest for freedom. That said, I'd like us to, begin our conversation today by going just one very quick step back to some issue that I discussed last night. I was talking about the situation of the southern Cameroon's refugees in La République du Cameroon, particularly those in Yaoundé who are facing eviction at Mvokpeti. And I did dwell quite a lot on that subject matter. And I've had a lot of calls today, a lot of feedback from a lot of people who tell me they were really moved by what they heard and saw regarding that situation in Vogbeti. And some people who have been to that particular location tell me that the situation is so pathetic and that the arguments being presented by the city mayor of Yaoundé really does not add up. It really doesn't add up because the purpose for the eviction of these people from that patch of land, it defeats any kind of, human imagination, especially when it comes to policy making. Because claiming that they want to, create a garbage recycling plant in that particular locality, that's a very polluting activity where you have, the presidential guard, you have the gendarmerie office that is right there, you have some police barracks too right around there, you have the zoo, the Vogbeti Zoo, and a lot of other structures in that same environment. So how do you, build a waste processing or a waste recycling plant in the heart of a densely populated area like that one? So you notice that the move is simply vicious. The move is simply because these are southern Cameroonians. The move is simply because these are the people they don't like. The move is simply because, of course, they have to cause harm to the people of the southern Cameroon who are generally not welcome. And I've taken time in my broadcast yesterday to explain why we're generally not welcome. And again, to close up on that subject matter, of course, I know that the governor of the central region of La République du Cameroon, Nasir Paul Biya, has had the opportunity to watch, the show, my broadcast of yesterday, just like Atangana Paul G, as well as the Prime Minister, the head of government of La République du Cameroon, Chief Joseph John Gute. And I hope that they are going to be taking measures to see how to intervene on behalf of these people that they claim always that they are, elites of. That said, we will go quickly to Kribi before we jump into the subject matter of our discussion today to meet another Southern Cameroonian. I've said this I mean, until it's now very much more like a broken record on this platform that I've tried to call the attention of the people of the southern Cameroons who are spread all over the hinterlands and some of the cities of the Republic du Cameroon to know that there will come a time where life will become very unbearable for them because they will generally always remain subjects of exploitation. Their inclusion or their acceptance in those communities will only be temporary until when they get whatever they want to get from them, they will make life unpleasant to them. And people keep thinking that perhaps I'm joking. Every now and then we have evidence. We saw what happened to our people out there in Van, some of them out there around Oja, who were, either producing upholstery, metal works, and all of those things. Their property were all destroyed. Their businesses were completely destroyed. This thing is happening daily. It's not something new. Take a watch. Here you have for yourself here, and this is a report on Equinox.
Voici ce qui reste de la maison en construction de Sieur Evaristus, ici au village Mbeka, une banlieue de la cité balnéaire de Kribi.
I want to come on the 19th of June for can do roofing. That was on a Friday. For can do roofing for us. I want to come and not meet up the house again. I only see some group of people they come out here. When the regent chief for here, by name Noel Chagadigi, I lead the delegation where they can broke this house down. So even the material that will be remain for here will not be able to get nothing. Only here they tell we say Anglophone they're not supposed to leave for their middle because na their village this.
Pourtant, les documents attestent.
So, did you hear that one? I don't want to go too far, but you hear it very plainly. He said it himself. You heard from the horse's own mouth. So the thing say Anglophones are not supposed to live for their mix. That's Anglophones referring to Southern Cameroonians. That you don't have a place there. This is an outskirt of Kribi, where he bought his land, Julie, bought his land, paid for it, has documents for his land, and has gone ahead to construct in a so-called country where they say vivre ensemble, in a so-called, a unitary state, where people are normally supposed to be welcome all over the place. But look at this. This is not the first time. This thing is happening all over the place. And I said this before. I'm blaming even our people in the diaspora, Southern Cameroonians in the diaspora, who are continuing to say, oh, there's business opportunity in this outskirts of Kribi, there's huge land there, it's cheap, I'm going to buy. You gather people from the Southern Cameroons and take them and go and place them in harm's way. This thing is happening, especially in the central region. You go to the Ntwi area, you find that a lot of our people are facing serious issues there, being tortured on a daily basis. We saw our people being seriously humiliated around Makenene. This thing is happening all over the place. How else do you want to be told that you don't belong? How else do you want to be told that you need to stand up and fight for what you believe in, and fight for your dignity, and fight to restore our land, and to get these people out of our land, so that we can finally live in our own land, explore the opportunities that are on our own land, define our own development priorities, transform our country into a place to be, and finally live in total dignity and respect of the human person. How else do you want to be told? How else? These reports are coming on a daily basis. There are too many of them that come in and I say, I'm not going to carry this anymore because I've spoken about these things, like I said earlier. It's not very much like a broken record. And when I say it, people come and say, oh, bro, is it the same thing that you're saying every day? The same thing every day? Because people are not listening. Because people are not paying attention. And because people are not acting. And so sometimes you have to be forced, or you are forced to repeat. You are forced to come back to some of these things so that people should learn. Let's close up with that report, at least for the next 10 seconds.
Une acquisition légitime de cette parcelle avec témoin à l'appui.
Notre frère papa qui avait cassé cet endroit, une forêt vierge, hors titre foncier. Notre papa à travers là, ça nous revient, comme il n'est plus là. Urbain Manasseh a amené son beau-frère pour qu'il s'installe là. Ça, ce n'est pas une faute.
Monsieur Évariste, qui a vu les dégâts de son investissement, a raison. Il faut qu'au bout d'un moment, que la méchanceté et l'orgueil finissent dans ce village, voire dans ce pays. Le Cameroun appartient à tout le monde. Moi qui vous parle, je suis marié d'une fille.
Anyway, I just want to end this there because, it's really of no essence going all the way. You see, that was the presentation of the paperwork showing that he actually bought the land. It's not like he's usurping. And you see those people talking, they are the families that came together and sold him that piece of land. They are confirming that he legitimately bought that piece of land. Yet, the chief of the village, the third class chief of the village, say he is an Anglophone. Of course, from Southern Cameroon, he doesn't have a right to, live there. He doesn't have a right to invest there. I guess the volume is high enough for a lot more of our people who are falling in the same trap to learn. You have to make hay while the sun shines. I have said this over and over. Once in a while, I'll come back to it just because I want that no one should ever stand anywhere, any day, to say I was never aware. That said, let's begin our show proper with this thought. You see, this picture has circulated a lot. It is everywhere on social media. And a lot of people look at it and it will seem just so banal. Say, why did the prisoner choose the bread instead of the key? You see, the person who says, if you know the answer, you're a philosopher. But the truth is, that question up there is fundamental. Why did the prisoner choose the bread instead of the key? This is the question that is confronting the intellectual class, not only in La République du Cameroon, but also in the southern Cameroons today. Let me be very clear here. A nation's greatest resource is not its petroleum, it's not its forests, not its minerals, or even its strategic geographic location. Its greatest resource is its thinking class, the thinking class. Every civilization that has transformed itself into a global power has done so because it nurtured independent minds, men and women who challenged convention, questioned authority, generated new ideas, and expanded the boundaries of human knowledge. Universities have historically served as society's conscience. Listen, society's conscience, universities, speaking uncomfortable truths when politics became detached from the public interest. You take a look around you. Look around the people around you. Look around those who say they are professors, they are university lecturers, or they are doctor this, that. Look around you. Do these people come anywhere close to the description of what I just said? Do those so-called institutions you call universities in Cameroon, when you look at the way they function, the way they operate, the products that come out of there, do they come anywhere close? History repeatedly reminds us that no country rises sustainably without an intellectually vibrant society. The scientific revolutions that transformed Europe, the technological breakthroughs that propelled the United States of America, the industrial rise of countries like Japan, and the developmental success of countries like South Korea and Singapore were all of them were driven by environments in which scholars, researchers, engineers, economists, jurists, and philosophers enjoyed sufficient intellectual space to innovate, to debate, and to influence public policy. When ideas compete freely, societies become more resilient. When independent thinking is discouraged, institutions gradually weaken. When I say this, take a quick look at Cameroon. Is there any single institution in Cameroon today that is functioning? Can you name one? I'm asking. Is there any single institution in that country today that is functioning? The judiciary is under the feet of the executive. The legislative under the feet of the executive. Can you recall the last time that any bill was ever discussed in Cameroon's parliament emanating from a member of parliament who looked around people in his constituency, around the environment in his constituency, in his or her constituency, and determined that a law needs to be passed like this to address this or that problem touching people in my constituency, and it was discussed? Never once. Every single bill that's ever been discussed has become law only came away from a to the palace. At least beginning 1982. This broadcast explores a difficult and controversial question in contemporary Cameroonian political history. How has the relationship between political power and the country's intellectual class evolved during more than 4 decades of President Biya's rule? Let's get down to specifics. And that's what I'm saying. More specifically, we examine the argument advanced by many scholars, commentators, and civil society observers that prolonged centralized rule, executive patronage, and the political appointments have altered the incentives facing Cameroon's universities, researchers, and public intellectuals. The concept guiding today's discussion is what we call the thingification. That's a thing, the thingification of the Cameroon intelligentsia. Borrowed from broader philosophical discussions of reification, thingification refers to a process through which individuals who ought to function as independent thinkers gradually become instruments serving institutional or political objectives. When I say this, I'm sure you're already visualizing the people. You look at television panels, listen to discussions on the media, and you look at the talking heads. All of them, people, professor this, doctor this, emeritus this, and all of those things. What is it that comes out of their mouths? Do you hear any of them really talking about things that have to do with the well-being of the people in the community? It does not necessarily imply that they are coerced into not doing the right thing. Often, this kind of thingification is achieved through incentives, career opportunities, patronage networks, prestige, and access to power. So this raises an important question. Can an intellectual remain entirely independent when the executive branch controls appointments to major public institutions, universities, commissions, constitutional bodies, and senior administrative positions? You know what happens in universities across the world? I'm here in the United States of America. The president of the United States of America will never go closer to saying he's appointing somebody at the head of a university. That's unheard of. Go to neighboring Nigeria. Let's not go far. Can you tell me the last time you heard that the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria was appointing a vice chancellor to university, appointing people in universities? These university bodies have senates, they have structures that control the functioning of those bodies. And those structures have put in place regulations that guarantee how people move from one stage to the other. And appointments or promotions are handled by these structures. But look at what happens with Cameroon. You see that here one day they say a decree has come out of the presidency of the republic is appointing a rector, appointing the vice rector, appointing the dean, appointing the vice dean, appointing the chief of this, the chief of that, even right down to heads of department, appointed by decree of the head of state or by an arrêté of the Minister of Higher Education. How then do you expect that in such a milieu you have independent thought? That doesn't happen. Political scientists have debated this question for decades across many countries, particularly those characterized by dominant party systems or highly centralized executive authority. Cameroon offers an especially interesting case. When I say Cameroon offers a very interesting case, there is no hyperbole about this. I mean exactly what I'm talking about. And we are going to be seeing just this. Look at. You will listen to someone here who says he is doctor. He speaks in French though. He says Dr. Mbandankani. This is an intellectual. He's doctor. So at least he has a doctorate. I won't say PhD because there's a difference between just a doctorate and a PhD. He has a doctorate. But hear the kind of thing that comes out of his mouth. Just listen. This is for a quick example.
Ce n'est pas le pape qui bénit le Cameroun, c'est le Cameroun qui bénit le pape. Le pape n'est pas en capacité de bénir le Cameroun, c'est le Cameroun qui le bénit.
Great declaration, Mr. President.
Non, mais je vous le dis.
Who can bless the Pope in Cameroon? You or the President?
C'est le Cameroun qui le bénit.
The whole country.
I don't want to take a lot of our time broadcasting this all the way to the end. You hear somebody who says he's an intellectual because he is simply disgruntled by the fact that Pope Leo the 16th or the 14th, that during his visit to Cameroon, did not praise Paul Biya, did not serve the government's purpose, did not fall into a trap that they expected that he was coming to stay there to be deifying Biya, to be doing this, or going to baptize the children or the grandchildren of Chantal Biya and all of those. What did they do? They had to turn it, and you hear somebody say, the Pope doesn't have the power to bless Cameroon. It's Cameroon that blesses the Pope. This is a doctor talking right there. So like I said a while ago, Cameroon offers an especially interesting case study. Since assuming office in 1982, President Paul Biya has presided over one of Africa's longest-serving governments. During this period, the country has dramatically expanded its higher education sector. Universities have multiplied. Now, I don't know how many universities are there. Almost every region has its university. Although, if you go by the real description, by the description that the late Professor Bernard Sokika Fonlong gave to a university, or by even the description that Professor Emeritus Mbangwana Paul Nkat gave, these are glorified high schools. Glorified high schools. But of course, there are many, and they are called universities. Thousands of Cameroonians have obtained doctoral degrees at home and abroad. The country has produced distinguished lawyers. Of course, we call distinguished lawyers. Like Maurice Kamto. There are all of them. Maurice Kamto. There are many of them. The country has produced economists, physicians, engineers, historians, philosophers, and social scientists whose academic achievements have attracted recognition beyond the borders of Cameroon. We just heard recently that Rebecca Enomchon, who is a tech mogul, has been elevated in the international community, in a great international body. You've heard about Barrister John Taku, or no, Barrister Charles Taku, Chief Charles Taku. That is a great guy at the International Criminal Court. Those are the kind of minds that have come out of that place. I'm not yet breaking into Southern Cameroon and Cameroon. I'm looking at it from the perspective that everyone looked at prior to 2017. Yet many observers simultaneously argue that public intellectual life became increasingly intertwined with political authority, rather than serving primarily as independent critics or policy innovators. Many academics accepted government appointments, chaired state institutions, served on constitutional bodies, or assumed ministerial responsibilities. To some, this reflected national service, but to others, it illustrated and still illustrates a broader pattern in which political proximity became increasingly valuable within academic milieu. As I'm talking to you today, as I'm talking to you right now, you ask, where are the intellectuals of Cameroon? When the country is going down and down and down the drains. I was watching television one day when I saw the Minister of Higher Education, Professor Agrégé, Jacques Famendongo, standing at the airport. And he told people, le chef de l'État est déjà monté dans l'avion. Applaudissez. Applaudissez. Wah, 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 wah. That is the intellectual class of Cameroon. That is what it has really become. And then I see you think that you have heard so much. There is another one they call Dr. Fridolenke. Hear him out. I like you and I to now go down to the basics. Let's not just theorize, let's judge them. What?
On veut pas. Mais en fait, j'ai un problème. C'est que je croyais que le président va se réveiller un monde de choc. Parce qu'on racontait que 35%, il y a trop de fous qu'on a fait. On ne parle pas seulement. On a trop de fous pour qu'on arrive à nos histoires de 50 machin de tout ça là. Il faut qu'on soit honnête. Soyons honnêtes. Il y a beaucoup de tricherie, de manipulation, de bourrage des jeunes. Ne vous prétendez pas qu'on a eu 40%. Même si on a cautionné, c'est pas parce qu'on savait que on ne faisait pas le faux. Donc arrêtez de vous vanter que vous avez eu 45. Combien vous avez dit combien?
Did you hear that? This is Dr. Fridolenke. Some of them call him Professor Fridolenke. Dr. Fridolenke. Confessing publicly that he and others participated in orchestrating fraud at the last presidential election of October 12, 2025 to enable Paul Biya to get to the 56 or 50 whatever percent that he claims to have. He says a lot happened. That they stuffed ballot boxes, they changed election return sheets, they did all kinds of things. And his frustration right here, Fridolenke, is because he's been waiting and waiting and waiting for that appointment that will reward him for doing such an ugly thing to come, and the government, the new government is not coming out, the appointment is not forthcoming, and he's frustrated and he's angry and he's spilling the beans. This is the intellectual. These are the intellectuals that are supposed to speak truth to power. These are the intellectuals whose pronouncements, whose opinions, whose inputs are supposed to impulse the transformation of the society. That is the intellectual class. If you thought you had heard a lot, and if you were beginning to scratch your head, no, don't go far. There is another one here called Professor Eric Matthias Onangide. He's talking here about the ongoing genocidal conflict in the southern Cameroons. While across the world, genuine intellectuals, diplomats, experts in matters of conflict resolution are telling the government of Cameroon, no country has ever won a war against a people it claims to be its own people. And this particular conflict that is going on has to do with an ideology. And therefore, you don't defeat an ideology with arms. But hear what the senior professor, Eric Matthias Onangide, has to say about it.
Et je suis désolé pour les gens qui parlent de choses qu'ils ne connaissent pas. Les États ont résolu la plupart du temps ces choses par la force.
Dans votre option, elle est militaire.
L'option, ça c'est du simplisme, il vous l'a dit. Il n'y a pas la solution militaire ici et la solution politique. La première solution, l'ordre doit régner. Et l'ordre règne. Ce n'est pas parce que les gens font des petites gesticulations avec les lance-roquettes que ça veut dire que l'ordre ne règne pas. Ils ont beau attaquer les positions de l'État camerounais est là. Deux, les réseaux même sont largement détruits et vont continuer à être détruits. Si la guerre dure, c'est en raison des exigences de la raison d'État telles que les interprète le chef de l'État. Le premier principe, c'est l'utilisation de la force. Ceux qui disent qu'on ne peut pas le faire.
So, I just want to let him go right there. Because I don't want to drag so much into, the fundamentals of all of those. Because at the start, you get them. You already hear them. You already feel them. You already understand exactly what they are talking about. Matthias Eric Onangini is saying here that the only way to resolve the conflict in the southern Cameroon is by the use of force. But this is a professor. Worse, he says he's a professor at law. This is a professor. This is someone whose thoughts, whose ideas, whose opinions should give direction, should help shape public policy. But you hear him talk there, he doesn't talk here as a professor. He's talking like someone who is hoping that someone seated somewhere is watching him talk. And at the end of this, he needs to be given a reward. At the time Eric Matthias Onangini was making all of this noise, he was nothing. He was making all of this noise, he was saying all of these things at that time, even his father was still in the cold. But after all this noise and all of that, his father, who is now of blessed memory, Joseph Owona, professor too, was finally brought and named as a member of the Constitutional Council, where he stayed until he died. And then Eric Matthias Onangini himself finally got appointed director of the University of Yaoundé. And this is what it is. All the professors, the researchers, who are supposed to be the engine, the engineers, the economists, who have to be the engine of the transformation of the society, have all left. They are all on television platforms praising mediocrity. They are all on media platforms deifying Paul Biya, a man who himself too often doesn't even care whether the society advances or not. And Cameroon today is clearly known across the world as one of the most underdeveloped countries that you can talk about. Cameroon is one of those countries where not a single individual up to the rank of director feels comfortable going to a hospital in that country where they are sick. They all want to fly abroad. The coverage in terms of electricity is less than 30%. Do they have roads? ProPublica published statistics even in 2024 that demonstrated that the first cause of death in Cameroon is not even malaria, it's not whatsoever, are road accidents. Road accidents claim between 6,000 to 10,000 people in Cameroon every year. I mean between 6,000 to 10,000 people. You heard Eric Matthias Onangini saying that order will reign, and even asserted that order is reigning. And said no matter what they do, the little gesticulations, attacking some few positions here and there, order will reign. Yet, at the moment I'm talking, going just by the somewhat transparent count being done by an activist of La République du Cameroun, Zuimanto, the government of Cameroon has already lost almost 2,000 soldiers in the southern Cameroons. But internal figures at the Ministry of Defense say almost 4,000 soldiers of La République du Cameroun have already died in the southern Cameroons. Is that winning Eric Matthias Onangini? But this is what it is. When this is the kind of intellectual class that you have in the country, then you should expect that that place is doomed, completely doomed. But you know, don't take my word for it. I'd like you to now listen also to another professor, this time Minister of Higher Education, Jacques Famendongo, talk about power alternation in Cameroon. Just listen to him. Pay quick attention.
L'avènement illustre la préscience démiurgique de notre président. Son génie cosmologique vient de forger une architectonique de la pérennité. L'instauration de cette vice-présidence est une fulgurance ontologique, une prophylaxie contre le vide institutionnel, naturellement, les ectoplasmes de l'opposition s'embourbent dans une logorée stérile. Leur vacuité d'admirer les empêche. Cette majestueuse ingénierie étatique, c'est une catharsis qui pulvérise la dissidence, but in English, the message must be clear. The supreme architect of our nation has done it, Ijan. This quantum amendment is the pinnacle of our logical evolution. The opposition is Joe hallucinating. We must improve the security of the state to avoid any vacuum. The newest presidency is a providential safety net. It is the guarantee of our stability. Thank you.
So, that part in English, I'm sure you were. I'm sure you asked yourself, if this is the Minister of Higher Education, university professor of a country that claims to be bilingual, you heard that thing he was speaking of English, you certainly were wondering whether he was speaking Bulu, or he was speaking Spanish, or he was mixing it with Chinese, or whatever. But the substance of what Jacques Famandongo was saying here is that the creation of the position of vice president following the constitutional amendment that operated in Cameroon early this 2026 is to guarantee that succession at the helm of the state will factor into two aspects. One, continuity, and two, it will follow a biological channel. So it's telling you, don't waste your time, don't bother yourself. What you are seeing is everything is being done to ensure that it will be continuity and it will be from father to son. This is an intellectual. When you hear this kind of thought, when you hear this kind of thing coming from the mouth of someone who is supposed to be talking about the strengthening of democratic institutions, who should be talking about the independence of institutions that will ensure peaceful power alternation at the helm of the state. But you rather get this kind of jargon. This is the Cameroon intellectual class. When you listen to this kind of things, you tell yourself, no wonder that country is where it is today. But please, don't hurry to move, because there is a lot more right ahead. I'd like us to listen now first to Jean de Dieu Momo. This was before he was appointed minister delegate at the Ministry of Justice.
Ce sont des otages. On a libéré une partie des otages. Il faut libérer les autres otages. Parce que il faut comprendre le problème anglophone. Il faut que quelqu'un réussisse à m'expliquer, à moi, avocat, juriste, qu'on arrête quelqu'un à Bamenda et que ce n'est pas la première fois. On va le mettre à Yaoundé, à Kondengui, pour le juger à Yaoundé. Vous l'avez arrêté au lieu de l'infraction. Il y a une justice à Bamenda. Il y a un tribunal de première, un tribunal de grande instance, un tribunal, la cour d'appel est là. On commence par là. Vous enlevez les gens là où ils ont commis l'infraction, vous les amener. Je dis que ce sont des otages. Et ce n'est pas la première fois. Chacun se souvient, il y a quelques temps, on avait arrêté les Sama Francis et un autre groupe dans les années 90 et on les avait toujours amenés à Yaoundé. Donc, Yaoundé, ce sont des otages. On a libéré une partie des otages.
So did you hear this? At this time, Jean de Dieu Momo, who was a lawyer and who was a presidential candidate in 2011, was saying, because this interview came shortly after some of the southern Cameroonians who were captured from the southern Cameroons, Boya, Bamenda, and other cities, including Nkongo Felix at Bobala and Dr. Fontaine Afoteka, were released. And he said, no, do not come and tell me that we should celebrate because some people have been set free. He said, normally they have to set all of those people free. And he said, don't call them. And he said, these people are hostages. This was Jean de Dieu Momo speaking. That these people are hostages. And he went ahead to explain. This is when he had free thought. This is when he was talking like an intellectual. This is when he was talking like a free thinker. He said, according to the principles of law, people should be tried in the jurisdictions where they are reported to have committed the offenses for which they are being charged. And this is what the law says. This is what that Cameroon Penal Code says. If you committed an offense in Bamenda, you are arrested in Bamenda, you should be tried in Bamenda. Even if you have to be court-martialed before the military tribunals, there's a military tribunal in Bamenda, or maybe in Bafoussam, that covers Bamenda and Bafoussam. I'm saying in their perspective. They capture people from Boya, straight to Yaoundé. Capture people from Bamenda to Yaoundé. Capture people from Fonfouka to Yaoundé. Capture people from Moi to Yaoundé. Capture people from Muyuka to Yaoundé. Capture people from Akwaya to Yaoundé. Jean de Dieu Momo, interpreting the law as is, says those people are hostages. And this is what all the other Southern Cameroonians, who are intellectuals as well, who are Professor Left, Dr. Wright, Associate Professor North, they all know this. They're all aware of this. But you won't see any one of them come to talk. Jean de Dieu Momo today says something different. He can't even repeat this because of one thing. Because he ended up into that same government apparatus. Here again is the same Jean de Dieu Momo or something else. Pay attention.
C'est simple, c'est que les promesses n'ayant pas été tenues, les anglophones ont été abusés. Voyez-vous, pourquoi on en arrive à la République unie, alors que la constitution de la République fédérale avait stigmatisé que la forme de l'État ne changera pas. La constitution le dit, que la forme fédérale de l'État, on ne la touchera pas. Il y a un article qui le dit. Malheureusement, on fait une autre constitution en 1972, en ignorant l'article qui a cimenté la relation avec le côté anglophone. La forme fédérale de l'État n'est pas susceptible de changer, n'est pas en débat. Et toute question relative à la forme de l'État est irrecevable. C'est écrit, noir et blanc.
Alors, Maître Momo, nous sommes d'accord.
So, this was Jean de Dieu Momo again. In the early days of this second phase, or this current phase of our liberation movement, he was saying this in black and white. He said, why the people are referring, the people of La République are referring to Southern Cameroonians as terrorists. They have to be conscious about one thing, that this conflict came about because of the machinations of La République du Cameroun. And it's clear, he quotes the federal constitution in its article 47 sub A, which said the federal nature of the state will be invalid. And he clarifies that that constitution even made it, more abundantly clear that any amendment submitted that has to do with the modification of the form of the state will be unacceptable. That's why he used the word sera irrecevable. So this was a constitutional clause meant to protect the Southern Cameroon's minority getting into a so-called union of two states equal in status with La République du Cameroun in 1961. But Jean de Dieu Momo explains here that what happened in 1972, called a referendum, was a scam. This is Jean de Dieu Momo, who's a lawyer, a citizen of La République du Cameroun, was a free thinker at the time he made these statements. But today, he has swallowed back all his words. And while Jean de Dieu Momo was making all these declarations, people like a certain Professor Victor Julius Ngo sat there and had read this provision, knows this provision, but comes up to narrate inanities and rather try to, deviate the public's attention from this salient truth, to a certain thing like, oh, there is a divide between the people of the Southwest and the Northwest. The people hate each other so much so that they can never ever live together. But I talked to you about the Biya Code, the Biya divide and rule strategy. You will recall that while Victor Jones was saying this in 1993, history has it that the people of the Southern Cameroons, both those from what they call Southwest and Northwest, refused to go to the tripartite conference that was held at the time to talk about constitutional amendment in separate ranks. They wanted the people to come, a delegation from Southwest, delegation from Northwest, as they call it, but the political class, those ones that are still there up to today, at the time refused. They said, no, we are one unit and we have to come as one delegation. You had a mix of people from what they call Southwest and what they call Northwest. But Victor Julius will come today, aka Professor, to tell you that the people of that Northern side hate themselves so much so that they can never ever come together. You expect the intellectual class to be the eye openers, to be the people who illuminate society, to be the people who will tell the political class, stop, this thing you are doing is wrong. It is taking us to the wrong direction. It is not in the public's interest. The intellectual class are supposed to be the vanguard of the society, the ones who speak truth to power, the ones who impulse the development of the country. But today, they have all abandoned the laboratories. You go to Iraq, you go to IRS, you go to all of those things. They are now just what you would call, they are now just shadows of themselves. Every single individual ought to be inside there doing research. They have all abandoned. They are at the various ministries. Some of them have even changed ministries. You go to a place, they say Professor this, he is sub-director. Sub-director to somebody who doesn't even have a master's degree, who is his director. Why? They're all looking for places where they can have access to illicit cash. Because Paul Biya convinced himself that the best way to consolidate power and be in power for life was to reduce the intellectual class to their barest expression, to thingify them, to make certificates become absolute nonsense, because he himself, Paul Biya himself, did not get too far. And you don't want to sit around and hear people come and be telling him that this or that or left or right. Amadou Ahidjo, who was the first president of Cameroon, had what they call brevet superior. He had a first school leaving certificate, but understood that politics is different from academic know-how. And so rather than feeling the complex, he transformed the intellectual class to become that body of advisors that churned out policies. And that is how, in that era, the country was not just operating by impulse, because Cameroon today is operating by impulse. The country was operating on development plans. They had goals, they had targets. They used to call them 5 years development plan. That's 5-year development plans. And they say during these 5 years, we will build an airport at Simalen. During these 5 years, we will get 2 more aircraft to add to the fleet of Khmer. That's why by the time Ahidjo left, Khmer had about 11 to 13 aircraft. During these 5 years, we will. Because he gave value to the intellectual class, and they were all in places where they were thinking the state forward. There might never have been that kind of free thought like you could criticize the president, but they were used in the drafting of policies. But when Paul Biya came over, they said, oh, Paul Biya is very educated. Want to have an idea? Of course. Paul Biya has a solid legal and administrative background that you can't take it away from him, an administrative academic background, although it is not that of a career academic or researcher. His education reflects preparation for the French colonial administrative service rather than that of an academic career in scholarship. So you hear this. Paul Biya's education reflects preparation for the French Colonial Administrative Service. French Colonial Administrative Service. I'm sure you will recall that when Paul Biya just took over as president of the United Republic of Cameroon in 1982, he is reputed to have made a statement that he was the best student of who? François Mitterrand. That he was the best student, sur le meilleur élève de François Mitterrand. That's the president of a free country, the president of an independent country. But when you read through his academic profile, go online to search, they tell you that Paul Biya's education reflects preparation for the French Colonial Administrative Service. And so, this is what he's been doing. Simply protecting the interests of France all along. But to do so, he needed to dwarf anyone that could claim any educational prowess above him. Let's look quickly at his educational background. You know, after completing his primary education in Cameroon, of course, Biya continued his secondary education at Lycée Leclerc, Yaoundé Lycée Général Leclerc. He left for there and went to Lycée Louis-le-Grand in Paris, France. And then he, of course, pursued his higher education in France, where he studied at the University of Paris, Sorbonne, the Faculty of Law, and came away from there with a licence en droit, that's with a first degree in law. And then went to Institut d'études politiques de Paris, that is where he read political science, Institut des hautes études d'outre-mer, an institution established to train senior administrators for France's overseas territories. You ask yourself, but why is Akuro taking us into Biya's educational background? Of course, no, I want you to be seeing this. Because when you get all of this, you understand why the interest of the people of Cameroon is about the last worry that Paul Biya has. Because he was trained in an institution, Institut des hautes études d'outre-mer. That's an institution established to train senior administrators for France's overseas territories. He was right to say he was the best student of François Mitterrand, because he was heading a French overseas territory. So in 1960, he obtained his licence en droit, that's bachelor's degree in public law. 1961, he had a diploma in political science, as I said. 1962, of course, the one from the Institut d'études d'outre-mer that I said. And then 1963, Diplôme d'études supérieures in public law. Of course, that's a postgraduate qualification that will be somewhere between master and what they used to call doctorat du troisième siècle. That is where he ends. So Paul Biya's educational path prepared him primarily for career in the higher civil service to protect French interests rather than anything else. That's why as soon as he came away from there, of course, Aïdjo appointed him chargé de mission at the presidency of the Republic as early as 1963. So, folks, why I bring this so-called intellectuals from La République du Cameroon on this platform is that you see that these people are transparent about what they think of the people of the Southern Cameroons. They are transparent about how the people of the Southern Cameroons should be tortured, should be maimed, should be humiliated, should be subdued. And then you ask yourself the question, faced with this, what has the Southern Cameroons intelligentsia done? What is the response? So what is the reaction of the Southern Cameroons intelligentsia? Before I get there, let's hear this gentleman who publicly ridicules the Southern Cameroons intelligentsia first.
Vous avez vu ce qui arrive au premier ministre chef du gouvernement de ce pays? Tout ce qu'il est en train d'endurer actuellement, c'est parce qu'il est anglophone. Et regardez sa place dans le protocole de l'État. À la 5e position. Il y a tout un débat qu'on a commencé depuis la dernière révision constitutionnelle. Des clans se battent, se combattent pour espérer que c'est dans leur clan qu'il y aura le vice-président. En oubliant
que naturellement, s'il y a un vice-président, et si nous sommes dans le concept, la réalité de l'unité nationale, ça ne devrait être qu'un anglophone.
So you see, this brilliant journalist, citizen of la République du Cameroon, is taking the example of Joseph Diongute, a whole Chief Doctor Joseph Diongute, Prime Minister and so-called head of government. Show you how he is ridiculed beyond imagination. And look at who is ridiculing him, Ferdinand Gongo, who doesn't have his qualification. What is the response of the Southern Cameroon's intelligentsia? What are they saying? How are they reacting to this? We say the Anglo-Saxons are people who have, a strong spirit, are people who, have an idea of their dignity, are people who are outspoken and who generally will stand for what they believe in. Is this what our intelligentsia is doing? Let's take a quick break and we will come back. We will come right inside our own house. As this broadcast progresses, one question remains especially important for the intellectuals of the Southern Cameroons. That is why I look at this segment of our discussion as a core message to the Southern Cameroons intelligentsia. And before we get into that, I'd like us to listen to Mo Ibrahim. Mo Ibrahim is an African billionaire who, way back in 2016, when the Southern Cameroons lawyers, we'll call them common law lawyers, and the teachers, and of course, the rest of the community just started agitating the Southern Cameroons and saying this whole nonsense of, living together, or this incest, or this, unfortunate relationship with the Republic du Cameroon is not serving the interests of the people of the Southern Cameroons. Mo Ibrahim, right at that time, made this very quick and important remark. Listen.
To come back to the one state is impossible because it doesn't work. We've seen it in Yugoslavia, we see today in Cameroon. You can't put people who are so hostile to each other in one state. So the only solution is the two-state, even if it's not working, but at least you can say it's containment for the West to have that solution, even if it doesn't work. To come back to the one.
So you heard that. He was very unmitigating. He did not mince words. He didn't need a soothsayer to come down to tell him what the solution to what was going on would be, what the lasting solution, a sustainable solution to what's going on between the people of the Southern Cameroons and those of the Republic of Cameroon would be. He made clear on the BBC that the only solution is a two-state solution in what's going on between the two Cameroons, between the Republic of Cameroon and the Southern Cameroons. That the only solution is a two-state solution. Why Mo Ibrahim? Why this gentleman took time to say this, way back in 2016. The intellectual class of the Southern Cameroons operated rather in a way that could make you think that they rather would have wanted this gentleman to be placed in a public place and stoned to death, regardless of one's preferred political solution, whether a return to federalism, enhanced autonomy, or absolute independence. The future of any society depends on the freedom of its thinkers. Universities, research institutes, professional associations, and independent scholars flourish when ideas can compete openly, when appointments reward merit, and when intellectual inquiry is guided by evidence rather than political expediency. Political expediency. When intellectual inquiry is guided by evidence rather than political expediency. That's why you will find people go on television platform and they open their mouths and you feel like vomiting. Because just hear this one for a start.
President Biya is a blessing to this country. Cameroonians, we are lucky. We are made because we have Biya, the helm of the statecraft. This president is our greatest marksman. He is our principal goal scorer. He has always taken us out of very difficult situations. First, because of his immense wisdom. Second, because of his aura and international clout. Those who meet President Biya for the first time are out and bow in reverence, in respect for his profound knowledge. President Biya is a blessing to...
Let's stop there. The one that I just spoken there is called Dr. Ashunyenti. He's a broadcast journalist in Cameroon. Dr. Ashunyenti. If you ask him, President Biya is a blessing. It's on everything. When you ask him, can you explain this? What do you point to in explaining this? The only reason this is done, political expediency. Because the position he currently holds was held by someone who, for singing praises too very well, ended up being appointed technical advisor at the presidency. Free thought is dead, not by coercion, no, but simply by patronage and political clientelism. Don't think that you have seen anything yet until you watch this one.
Very good report card from nursing school to university, but jobless. Where am I heading to? So we want to tell Cameroonians, gather those report cards and bring. Probably say, I will give him. Go and give your President Biya. Either we'll have good report cards with job, or we'll take your report cards back and allow us jobless and know that we have no way to go. But God created this nation, gave us life, but wickedness has placed us under darkness. Okay. And that's why deliverance will even start here with people like Prof. Okay. First, stop defending evil. Okay. So very good report card from nursing school to university, but jobless. Where am I heading to? So we want to tell Cameroonians, gather those report cards and bring. Probably say, I will give him. Go and give your President Biya. Either we'll have good report cards with job, or we'll take your report cards back and allow us jobless and know that we have no way to go. But God created this nation, gave us life, but wickedness has placed us under darkness. Okay. And that's why deliverance will even start here with people like Prof. Okay. First, stop defending evil. Okay. So very good.
So did you see that? This gentleman talking is himself a doctor. The person he's accusing is Professor Elvis Ngolengole. And hear what he's telling him? Stop defending evil. Why is he telling him that? Because you sit down and you are all seeing the society is decaying. The community is burning. People are being slaughtered like animals. Over 400 village communities have been reduced to ashes. But somebody sits on a set and is saying that Biya is an apostle of peace. Somebody sits on a television set and is saying that Biya, in fact, the greatest thing he has brought to the country is peace. When the country is tearing apart. This is what it is. And this gentleman too, doctor, who was chastising Professor Elvis Ngolengole, ended up being caught up. If you listen to him today, this vitriol is gone. If you listen to him today, he now tells you he's even sorry that he spoke with a free mind. Because in a country like that one, where you have to take care of hunger issues, where the problems of butter and bread are more important than the advancement of the community, you cannot afford to think freely. That's why I say many Southern Cameroonian scholars, professionals, and civil society actors argue that the Southern Cameroon's future should include institutions capable of protecting academic freedom, rewarding excellence, and encouraging innovation. They contend that only in an environment where intellectuals can question authority without fear, fully contribute to the development of their society. This is what is being said. That it is only in an environment where intellectuals can question authority without fear, conduct research independently, and participate freely in public debate can they fully contribute to the development of their society. You recall that there was a time that people were captured, people were kidnapped all over the Southern Cameroons and shipped to Yaoundé, and they are still rotting in jails until today. What were they accused of? Of propagating federalist ideologies. Just for talking about the form of the state. For propagating federalist ideology. This only became decriminalized. Talks about federalism only became decriminalized when Laurent Esso, the Minister of Justice, keeper of the seals of La République du Cameroon, traveled around Europe to visit the diaspora and returned and sent a report to the presidency of the Republic, to Paul Biya, of course, a copy of which I obtained. I had made a lot of noise about that particular report, in which he said they should decriminalize talk of federalism for one reason, not because the government wants to return to a federal system, but simply because it will allow those who identify as federalists to be free to attack those who are pro-independence. And in that way, La République du Cameroon will stand by and watch the children of the Southern Cameroons tear themselves apart and then weaken their own liberation movement. That is the only reason. Nothing more. So whether that future, the future of the Southern Cameroons, is pursued through constitutional reform, greater autonomy, or self-determination remains a subject of profound political disagreement. But the underlying aspiration expressed by many in the Southern Cameroons, by a huge majority of Southern Cameroonians, is the same: a society in which knowledge, rather than political patronage, becomes the principal engine of progress. In this regard, many Southern Cameroonians maintain that only one constitutional arrangement can fully guarantee a society in which the intelligentsia is free to think, innovate, and lead without political patronage, and that is absolute independence of the Southern Cameroons. That one, at least 95% of the people of the Southern Cameroons agree on. They point to consultations reportedly conducted, of course, that were conducted at the behest of the late Christian Cardinal Toomey, during which, of course, according to widely cited accounts and the report that he presented himself on camera, about 69% of respondents within the Southern Cameroons favored absolute independence. Do not forget, the only people consulted were people on the territory. Those in the diaspora were not included. For many, those findings continue to symbolize a deeply held aspiration for self-determination and institutional renewal. The reason is simple. When this happens, it will free even our intellectual class. History repeatedly demonstrates that nations rise not merely because of abundant natural resources, but because they cultivate independent minds capable of generating new ideas, challenging old assumptions, and imagining better institutions. The enduring challenge for the Southern Cameroons is how to build conditions in which intellectual life can flourish. Academic merit is respected, and future generations are encouraged to lead through scholarship, innovation, and the public service rather than through dependence on political favoritism. A society where we will not witness aberrations like the one I'm about to let you watch. Because what you're about to watch is what you call an academic aberration. Watch.
That by the grace of God we've attained the achievement of education, being the first full professor in our subdivision. It's a wonderful blessing. But this can only go a long way to express thanks to the head of state, President Biya, His Excellency Biya, for giving us the opportunity to go to school free. Education in Cameroon is absolutely free. For supporting us, giving us all the possibilities to change trade and get to this level. And as the fund said, we use this opportunity to tell him he should live long, and the entire WhatsApp division, Donga Mantung as usual, we are behind him, and that we plead on him to stand as the next presidential election is coming and ventilate and venerate himself as always as a natural leader for Cameroon. Thank you very much.
You heard a few things there. Natural leader. You heard a few horrible things there. Professor Mfunte Makbolak is a personal friend. We live together in the same municipality in Yaoundé. I had a singular opportunity to share with him in Maroua when I was appointed or rather transferred to work as CRTV in Maroua. I had the opportunity to share a lot of academic knowledge with him, including our desire to constantly explore more grounds for knowledge through international conferences. It was at his behest and through his impulsion that I attended the Africa Media and Democracy Conference in Accra, Ghana, where I had the opportunity, to meet professionals and scholars from across Africa. This is a gentleman who ate Gary and granite, who struggled. We struggled together living at Liberty Palace, just above Bonamo Sadi in Yaoundé, to become what he finally became. Credit is not given here perhaps to the poor parents who were struggling to see him through. And he's not taking credit for the effort he put in to rise up to this position. Credit is given to President Biya that supposedly made it possible for my dear friend, who is an intelligent fellow. He is. I'm not throwing him flowers. He is an intelligent fellow to become professor. This is where I'm talking about when I'm referring to the thingification of the intelligentsia. I see we have to thank the president of the. Why thank? Because you're hoping now that I'm an associate professor or now that I'm professor, I need an appointment. And that appointment can only come by praising Biya. Not because you're going to sit anywhere to start contributing those ideas to impulse the advancement of the community. No. You have to pour this in all to throw flowers on Biya. This is definitely not what the late venerated Professor Bernard Nsokika Fonlo was thinking about when he wrote his book, The Genuine Intellectual. This is definitely not what he was thinking about. This is not what was going through his mind. Because this is what I call an aberration. I end up saying, oh, we are all behind the head of state. How did you manage to get to one? If you see the road heading to one, my goodness, you will wonder what he's talking about. I wonder if the people who have electricity. I wonder if they even have good medical facilities. I wonder. And while Mark Bolak, my dear friend, was saying all of these things, his brothers and sisters were being slaughtered like animals. It was just around the same time that Sam Sawyer was killed alive on motion television. This is not the role we expect the Southern Cameroon's intelligentsia to play. And you will find another one here. This is Chief Dr. Joseph John Gute, Prime Minister, Head of Government for La République du Cameroun. At least that is the title that he has. And we know that intellectuals recognize one thing, that you are at least humble enough. If you can't tell the people the plain truth, once you are disproved, you at least are humble enough to come and say, I heard. Hear him.
I've heard people say that, oh, they are going to create a refinery in Libya. It's not true. Technically, it's not possible. 80% of the fuel that will be refined in Sonara, because now Sonara before, you know, it was built by Total, a French concern, and Total built it in such a way that Sonara was importing sweet crude from Nigeria and refining. Sonara could not refine a liter of Cameroonian crude. You all know that. But this time they are going to reduce Sonara in such a way that the primary objective will be to refine Cameroonian crude. And anybody who tells you that it's going to be done in Kribi is lying, because 80% of the crude comes from the backwaters of Paco and Dian. The transport cost will be enormous if you have to take it to Kribi. So technically, it is not possible. But you have people who are distorting things and giving you the impression that, oh, Sonara is finished, it's only in Kribi that they will make a crude. It is not true. I've heard people say that, oh, they are going to create a refinery in Libya. It's not true. Technically, it's not possible. 80%.
So did you hear? Chief Dr. Joseph John Gute, when he made these declarations, said it's technically not even possible that they will construct an ultra-modern refinery in Kribi, effectively killing Sonara in Limbe, and then we'll have to transport the crude oil, 80% of which is drilled from the backwaters of Fako and Dian. He hails from Dian. And then that the cost of transportation by pipeline all the way to Kribi for refining will be so unbearable. And he said all of those things were lies. No refinery was going to be constructed in Kribi. Less than 2 months after this statement, less than 2 months after he made this statement, Dr. Joseph John Gute, La République du Cameroun, was announcing the laying of the foundation stone for the construction of an ultra-modern refinery in Kribi. And Chief Dr. Joseph John Gute's son, who was working at the SNH, was one of the officials piloting that project in Kribi. They were not just doing that, they were also constructing an ultra-modern hydrocarbons product storage facility in Kribi. I mean, less than 1 month and a half. Did Joseph John Gute ever find time to tell the people of the Southern Cameroon I misled you? This is exactly what we are talking about. When the intellectual class are reduced to non-starters, are thingified, reduced to parrots, and are being ridiculed on a daily basis, what do you expect from such a society? And I said earlier that this is not the kind of atmosphere that the late venerated Professor Bernard Sokika Fondo. This is not the kind of things he foresaw when he wrote the book, The Genuine Intellectual. So let's look at what message Professor Bernard Sokika Fondo has for the Southern Cameroon's intelligentsia all the way from his grave in Southland. In his seminal 1978 work, The Genuine Intellectual, Bernard Nsokika Fonlo, argues that a genuine intellectual is not merely a university graduate or a certificate holder, but a holistic citizen who fuses high scientific intellect with profound moral and social responsibility. Ashunyenti, did you hear that? Chief Dr. Joseph Jengute, did you also hear that? Did you? And to all of those, the Callistus, Fulgentris, and all the others, who are doctors, professors, and all of those things. Huh? Professor Ufe Chinjemelo, did you hear that? Often referred to as the Cameroonian Socrates, Fanon wrote this book as a philosophical guide for African university students. He wasn't even thinking of founding Cameroons. He wanted to transform them into critical thinkers who could build post-colonial African societies rather than becoming self-serving elites. Because all the bunch that we have called today our intellectual class are self-serving elites. Recently, I watched a segment in which Professor Willibrod Nzengwa was being interviewed, and of course I was amazed that he stayed on the facts. To be honest, at some point I even feared for him, and I'm going to bring that cut on this platform one of those days. Fonlon's concept of the genuine intellectual is built upon several core pillars. First, the tripartite integration, that is scientific, moral, and spiritual. So he argues that university education is completely useless if it only teaches technical skills. To him, a genuine intellectual must approach the world through three integrated dimensions. Number one, which is scientific, mastering the scientific method, data collection, and rigorous logical inquiry to find ultimate objective truth. Again, we are on truth. The moral part, because it's very important, you need the moral compass. Practicing strict moral restraint, ethical decision making, and deep humaneness. Deep humaneness. Look at the Southern Cameroon's intellectual class today. When you talk of humaneness, they are all silent, even as we speak. While a certain city mayor in Yaoundé is threatening hundreds of Southern Cameroon's refugees in Vogbeti, they are all silent, they are all quiet, their lips are sealed. They are afraid to talk because talking might jeopardize the little sinecure positions they already hold and have access to illicit money. They are all frightened, terrified, because they are waiting for that eternal new government that is not coming. And making any statement at this time might, put them on the bad side, on the wrong side, and they may not be considered. They are silent. Where they are burning people alive in their homes, in Ikata, in Moyoka, they are silent. Where they are raping our children, our mothers, our wives, they are silent. Where they roasted, reduced over 400 village communities to ashes, they are silent. In situations where they are not silent, they justify the murderous action of an evil system. And he talks of the spiritual dimension. That's cultivating the human spirit and soul to ensure that knowledge serves a higher existential purpose. He also talks of the absolute freedom of the mind. So he's influenced heavily by John Henry Newman's the idea of a university. Fanon stresses that a university must be a sacred space where the only authority is the mind and the only nobility is genius. Oh no. This is from another planet, no? Really from another planet. To expect this kind of things from these people, it will be madness. So he says a genuine intellectual must possess a fighting spirit to reject intellectual laziness and conformity. Universities must jealously protect academic freedom from political, economic, or government interference. If an institution falls or fails to teach a student how to think critically and in total freedom, it has taught them nothing of value. That is why when I listen to this, hear it with me.
It's not everybody out there that has the intellectual gravitas, the intellectual pedigree to be able to understand the salient contours of legal interpretation. It's not everybody out there that has the intellectual gravitas, the intellectual pedigree to be able to understand the salient contours of legal interpretation. It's not everybody out there that has the...
I let it play over and over so that I see if someone, somewhere, would tell me that they understood anything from what Dr. Ashonyenti is saying here. They are all struggling to defend the indefensible. They are all struggling to portray failure as success. They are all struggling to tell the people that they are not experiencing what they are experiencing. They are all struggling to tell the people that they are not in hell, they are in paradise. They are all struggling to tell the people that Cameroon is not suffering from massive unemployment, it's rather suffering from too much employment. It's painful sometimes to watch some of these things. That's why Professor Fonlong says says the central role, that he says philosophy plays a central role as the fundamental baselines for all fields of study. He believes philosophy disciplines that philosophy will discipline and bend the mind in a way that standard technical courses cannot do. And to be very honest, I don't want to base my mind so much on some of those aspects of things that he said that were too academic. Let's look at what he says about the radical social responsibility and social abnegation of the intellectual class. He says a person does not earn the title of an intellectual simply by storing a massive encyclopedia of facts in their head. True intellect requires putting specialized knowledge directly to the service of the public commonwealth before considering personal gain. Fonlong calls for extreme self-abnegation, that is self-denial, sacrificing personal luxuries and wealth to act as the progressive mind and eye of the society. You are listening to me. You are watching me. You are a doctor. You are a professor of Southern Cameroon's extraction. Do you find your place in this definition of who an intellectual is? Perhaps you didn't hear me well. Professor Bernard Fonlong says, a person does not earn the title of an intellectual simply by storing a massive encyclopedia of facts in their head. He says true intellect requires putting specialized knowledge directly to the service of the public commonwealth before considering personal gain. This is what he says. And then the last part that he falls on is the suspicion of partisan politics. Because while Fonlong spent part of his life also as a high-ranking government minister in Cameroon, his book displays a deeply conflicted view of politics. He concludes that while some genuine intellectuals must step into the political arena to guide the nation, politics is inherently messy and corrupting. Therefore, he argues that society heavily relies on intellectual outsiders. Today, there is not a single intellectual in the Southern Cameroons who believes that they should be outside of the CPD and chopping arrangement. No. It relies on intellectual outsiders, independent scholars who remain completely free of partisan politics to speak the unbiased truth to power. Honestly speaking, in everything that I watched, that I screened when I was preparing this broadcast, I ended up being able to hail just one man. One. Tambetiku, and this is why.
So that is a situation our youth are going through. Now, whether you're coming from Douala, from Yaoundé, they know in Boya, all the youth are criminal. That is what they know, that our children are all criminals. And the only way to get money from them is to take their phones. But I go to Yaoundé and Douala, I don't see these things happening. What have we done to deserve all of this? That our children should not move freely? Why is it only perpetrated in this part of the country? And yet we are talking of solving crisis, conflict. How do we end the conflict when every day injustice is perpetrated on the youth? So that is a situation our youth are going through. Now, whether you're coming from Douala, from Yaoundé, they know in Boya, all the youths are criminal. That is what they know.
So you see, Tambetiku is the only eye in that whole huge forest who had the courage, the effrontery, and the temerity to stand up and to tell the powers that be that the young people of the southern Cameroons are having enough. To point out this evil that's been perpetrated on our people, that's been perpetrated on our young people. To decry the fate of our people and to say this injustice has lasted just too long and to call it by its name, that are being treated like this just for being southern Cameroonians. Candidly, I believe that the take-home message from this broadcast is that the southern Cameroon's intellectuals or the Intelligentsia, who are also standing on the sidelines because they are afraid of being vilified by a system they are hoping to get benefits from. There are a lot of them abroad, a lot of them at home, who will not openly identify with a cause that will benefit everyone, including their children and their children's children and generations of southern Cameroonians to come. You even call them. Can you come and say what? I'm afraid. They may stop me from going back home. My people have said that I should be careful, I should not talk. Because if I'm talking, I'll be putting them in harm's way because they are looking to benefit certain things from the government. And this is where we are. The thingification of the intelligentsia has led us where we are. You see even in La République du Cameroon, on the body politics of La République du Cameroon, the opposition is made up of basically those that you call the chaffs. You have a few intellectuals who have gone there to lead, but they can't have a following of other intellectuals like them because everyone is looking for a place in some obscure office where they can have access to illicit money. You have people of academic metal in the southern Cameroons who will not open their mouth or their mouths to denounce the ills that happen in the southern Cameroons because they are still sitting and hoping that someday they may benefit something from our being attached as slaves to La République du Cameroon. It is painful, it is vexing. And you see those of us who are sticking our necks and talking about these things every day as fools, as court jesters, as lost minds, who don't realize that the most important thing to do now is to be part of the chopping arrangement. It is painful, it is shameful, but unfortunately, that is the reality. That is the current worldview. So, folks, I want to thank all of you who spend time with me on the JMA Connections, watching this rather long broadcast. If this was your first time on the JMA Connections, please go right ahead and hit on that subscribe button and personalize so that anytime something new drops on this platform, you will be the first to know. And of course, do not forget to drop a like. And I'm waiting for your comments at the comment section. Don't insult any individual. Let's focus on the issues. Be part of the conversation. And of course, do not forget to share the link to this communication. Share it as much as possible so that we'll continue to reach as many people as possible. And of course, I want to thank all of you for your very kind attention. And as usual, let's end it by saying, to God and to Him alone be all the glory. Bye.
Miami.